This is my fourth reflection on labor, slavery, and caste in the Spanish colonial system. So this basically shows us that the force that started the United States mainly from Spain, and they show how Spanish actions laid a foundation that would echo through centuries of U.S. expansion, as well as slavery and indigenous dispositions. So basically, it all started, I guess, in 1493 when Pope Alexander issued the Inter Caestra, granting Spanish the exclusive rights to claim lands in the New World. This document purpose was clear: to bring under your sway the said mainland and islands with their residents, and to bring them to the Catholic faith. End quote. This wasn't just religious; it was also political. Spain wanted full control of all lands. Quote, discovered and to be discovered, end quote, west of the set line. Okay, so what does this all say? It basically says that from the beginning, European powers viewed non-Christian people as obstacles or resources, how we saw starting AP World, like the white man's burden and the civilizing missions, they would use it. And this was even seen in U.S. Supreme Court later with Johnson versus McDonald to declare that Native Americans only had a quote, right of occupancy, not ownership. Okay, next we turn to David Witt's source on slavery, which basically, by the time that the English founded Virginia, I think it was 1607, quote, Africans and people of Africa descended had already been present in Americas for more than a century, end quote. So the slave trade wasn't just new, it was an inherited one now. And it also said that the Portuguese and Spanish colonies were built on trade posts along African coasts, where they dealt with goods like gold, ivory, as well as human lives. And approximately 475,000 enslaved Africans had been voluntarily transported to the Spanish Americas as well as Brazil. So what does this say? The institution of slavery, often seen as British or more of the southern U.S. legacy, was rooted deeply in Spanish and Portuguese systems, and basically it developed into a racialized system of labor and control that shaped the Americas. Something really interesting was, quote, the black conquistadors, and quote, like Juan Garrido, and enslaved Africans weren't just like what we believe, but they were also actors in the history in a way, and helping build the colonial societies. Okay, so there was of course pushback. For example, in 1550, Bartolomé de las Casas argued that the Council of valued that Spanish treatment of the native people was, quote, tyrannical, unjust, and inquisitive, but he was firmly opposed by, for example, Guinness de Sepúlveda, who claimed Indians were, quote, natural slaves. So, what does this say? The moral argument alone, really challenged the structure of empire. The development of Spanish colonialism included not just military forces, but it also included legal as well as religious debates that continue to be echoed in discussions today about indigenous rights today. So finally, from the sources, I concluded that in 1540, I think, the Spanish crown officially authorized Francisco Vázquez de Colonial to explore the American Southwest, and the goal was clear, which was, quote, bring the natives that the province under our sway, domination, and bring them into the knowledge of the Holy Catholic faith, end quote, which very similar to the beginning. It basically says that English colonies were imagined, and Spain was shaping the geography and the power structures of what would become the United States, and the development of U.S. territory owes much to these early Spanish expeditions. Okay, so this is my more personal reflection on these sources, which were that they changed how I viewed U.S. history. I used to think it started with Plymouth Rock or Jamestown, and through these sources, I now understand that it started with, how do you say, like Popple decrease, I guess, like his decrease to others, and African captives and indigenous resistance, and overall like Spanish conquistadors as well. As someone who's studying in Latin America history too, the similarities are very striking, since in both Latin America and what became the U.S., colonization involved forced conversations, slavery, and indigenous displacements. The role of Catholicism, race, and imperial ambition shaped both regions, but there are also differences. In Latin America, Africans and indigenous people were often integrated unequally into colonial societies. In contrast, basically, the U.S. history moved more towards inclusion and removal. And overall, ultimately, these materials show that the foundation of the United States were laid long before its independence, and in systems built by Spain, enforced by the church, and shaped by African and Native people, whose lives were basically transformed, and they were often erased by the conquest. And yeah, thank you.